RV furnaces suck. It's about as simple as I can put it, which is why I'm actually excited for this review today. This is a product that I've been kind of trying to chase down for a little bit. As you guys know, I do review some products. A lot of times these companies reach out to me. Fogati has made that a little difficult, a little bit of a language barrier in some places, but I finally got through to them. Now, I've actually done a review on a Fogati water heater before, and the Fogati tankless water heaters are actually installed by some manufacturers. So this isn't just some like one-off brand. They are used by some RV manufacturers, and they make more than water heaters and furnaces. They also make air conditioners and some other things. I'll put a link to their website in the description if you want to see what they have to offer. And I'll start off by saying this is not a paid endorsement. I haven't accepted, nor would I accept any money for a review. Fogati did send me this furnace to review. And after watching this, you're going to see why I actually consider this an upgrade to the typical RV furnace that you have in your RV. Now, at a first glance here, these two look identical. This is the new Fogati, and this is your standard Suburban, which is in most of your RVs. If not, it's probably a Dometic, and fun fact, they're really both the same exact thing. And if you take a look at these two, you will see that they resemble each other very well. They look almost identical. Key word is almost, because Fogati has done this little thing called innovation and actually tried to change some of the issues that we've been having with these furnaces for years and years. Now, the Dometic and Suburban platform, again, which is what's in most of your RVs, hasn't really changed at all over, gosh, at least the past decade. Not a whole lot has changed with these furnaces. But if you look at the price tag, you'd think they were reinventing heat. These things are ridiculously expensive to replace in your RV. And why would you want to keep replacing it or replacing the same components that keep failing over and over and over again? Eventually some innovation needs to happen, and I feel like that's what Fogati is doing. So although these two look identical, I'm going to go over some of the key differences. Now, a lot of times when these companies send me products like this, they don't want me comparing it side by side with what else is out there. You know, they want you to showcase their product, and they don't want it to be compared or equal to other products. But the reason I'm doing this today is because it's actually going to work pretty well in their favor. There was a lot about this furnace, although again, that looks identical to this one. That was a lot better. So let's start talking about those. Now, the very first one, and this is what actually caught my eye right on their Facebook ad. That's where I first saw these furnaces, was through a Facebook ad for a Fogati RV furnace. And I was like, hey, a different name. And I clicked the image. And all I had to see was one image to start commenting and trying to reach out to them that I wanted to check one of these out. And that, simply put, was this right here. This is a pressure switch. This pressure switch has a small tube that goes over to the combustion chamber to detect airflow. This is a pretty important safety feature. This is something that every furnace has. It wants to make sure that it's not trying to ignite the burner if it doesn't have air circulation so that it can do that safely. These furnaces do that as well, but unfortunately both Suburban and Dometic are still using a sail switch on their setup. Sail switch is what you'll typically find again on a Suburban or a Dometic, and that is what they're using to detect airflow. Now, the reason that's so important to me, and some of you guys probably already know this, is the sail switch is the most common issue with an RV furnace. Now, I know you guys have seen my videos saying it's not always the sail switch properly diagnosed. I still stand by that. You should still properly diagnose things, but I'll be honest, a lot of the times it is the sail switch. Those little sail switches just get a little bit of hair or pet dander or anything stuck in them, and they fail. Not to mention the parts themselves are just very inexpensive, cheaply made switches, and they fail. Now, there's two things to take from what I just told you. One, we're using a different type of switch. This is a diaphragm style pressure switch, which means that no airflow is actually going through it. In other words, no pet dander, pet hair, dust, or debris are actually touching that switch. So we've already eliminated one of the biggest issues with the furnace, which is stuff getting stuck in the sail switch. And they achieve this by, again, running this small tube from the sensor over to the combustion chamber. I'm going to tell you why that's super important here in a sec. Let's talk about how the Suburban currently does it. You have that sail switch, again, which is a cheaply made part and can easily be defeated by a little clump of hair. But that sensor, if you will, or switch, is on the blower side. This is the side of the furnace that takes the warm air on the heat exchanger and blows it backwards into the RV, if you will, in layman's terms. Now, again, I told you that that was a safety switch. Just because we have airflow over here does not mean that the combustion wheel hasn't melted, hasn't come loose from the shaft, that it hasn't shredded itself. There's no way to confirm that there's airflow in the combustion chamber simply by checking it over here. Do both fan wheels use the same motor? Yes. But I've run into plenty of situations where you've had melted fan wheels that have come off. You know, they're broken, they're not producing airflow. But hey, this side is spinning, so it's going to tell this furnace to keep burning. Now we look over here at the Fogati, and they're using that pressure switch again, but they're running it to the combustion side. Meaning, it doesn't care if there's airflow over here blowing the warm air off the heat exchanger. It cares if there's a flame with no circulation, in other words, overheating the heat exchanger or potentially causing a fire. This is not only going to be more accurate, more reliable, it's going to be safer. They're checking the correct side of the furnace for airflow, and they're also eliminating the issues with it. Hands down, if you gave me this exact furnace and just put that switch on there, I would already tell you this was an upgrade and a far better option, but it only gets better from here. And I know that's hard to believe for, you know, a product that's not an OEM product or whatever. This is a far better furnace. Let's keep talking. Another thing I want to talk about is serviceability. Now, this did have some cons when it comes to serviceability. Now, a lot of you guys have those furnace access doors on the front of or the side of your RV. As a matter of fact, if you watch all of my videos, you'll see that I've mentioned several times that when you're buying an RV, you should pay attention to that little access door because it's going to give you access to all of the vital components inside of your furnace without having to pull this whole thing out of a cabinet somewhere. So what you can access from that access door is important to me. Now, on a Suburban, yeah, you can access the sail switch. You can get your hand back there and get to the control board. That's about it. In order to, say, change a blower wheel, I've got to pull this whole front cover off. In order to get the motor out, to finalize that, I have to get to the bottom side of this furnace to disconnect the ground wire. Pretty much anything you want to change out in here besides a couple little things here in the front, you've got to pull the whole core out. It's one of the things I complained about the most is, you know, some of these things just could have been a little bit easier to access, especially if you're going to continue making unreliable furnaces, at least make them easy to fix. We didn't get too much over here with the Fogati. As a matter of fact, we got some pros and then they got balanced out by just as many cons. For instance, the gas valve, which is located directly at the top up here on the Fogati furnace, which you can actually access just by having that front cover off. Whereas on the Suburban, it's actually located underneath the furnace and you'll have to have the whole core pulled out just so that you can access that gas valve and test it properly. Now on the Fogati, they actually go a step further. Not only are some of the parts easier to access, every single thing on this furnace has a quick connect little plug, so you could just disconnect it, check for power, supply power with something like a power probe. And when it comes to replacing parts, it's even easier. You just have a quick connect connector. And again, that's on pretty much everything. When it comes to that same situation of, say, having to remove the blower wheel to replace it or change out a blower motor, you have power and ground coming directly from the motor to the control board. You don't have to get to the bottom of the furnace to the grounding block like you do on a Suburban. So they've made some things easier and some things harder technically. While we're on that note, we'll kind of talk about removing it because there are times, you know, replacing certain components that you do just have to pull the whole core out. Bench test it, get it fixed properly. Some of those involve pulling the core. And I will say with the Fogati, that was a con. It is going to be extremely hard to get this core out. On a Suburban, you can remove one screw in the front, remove your propane line, and this thing essentially slides out. Sometimes you might have more than one screw, but usually there's just one screw in the front, disconnect your propane line, and disconnect your wiring harness, the 4 wires, and this should slide right out. Whereas the Fogati, that's not possible. Unfortunately, they do it kind of like if you've ever taken a computer apart, a computer case. In order to get this to this core inside of here, you have to remove screws along the middle band here, as well as along the entire perimeter and the back. And then this cover, if you will, comes out. Whereas on a Suburban, this stays in the RV. And again, the core slides out of this. You're not going to have that with the Fogati. And again, just giving my honest review, I'm going to consider that a con. I hope Fogati watches this and maybe makes further improvements from that. But that's definitely something I'm going to consider kind of a big con, especially for serviceability, which is a big topic of mine. But continuing on with serviceability and what's different and why this is potentially an upgrade, let's go ahead and look at the control board. If you look at the control board of a Suburban, you'll see there are very few connections. There's not a whole lot going on the control board. It's pretty simple. And then if you look over here at the Fogati, we have a lot more inputs and a lot more things coming in and out of this control board. And that is because every single thing on this furnace is actually wired individually. So on a Suburban, you have things that are kind of looped together, like the over limit switch, as well as the sail switch, are sometimes part of the same circuit. So what I often call like the safety circuit. Those are the safety devices of the furnace. So when you get an error code, which is usually just a series of flashing lights on the control board, they're very, very, very generic, because it's just telling you, hey, there's an airflow issue or a voltage issue, if you will. They're not very specific. The control board on here, since each individual thing, the gas valve, the pressure switch, the over limit switch, the blower motor, every single device on here has its own input to the board. So it's actually getting feedback on each individual device. So when this thing gives you error codes, it's actually guiding you closer to the true issue. Something along the lines of where tech support might actually be more beneficial, because even without a multimeter, if you can give them the proper error codes and what's going on, they might actually be able to diagnose it that way. Now that benefits you as an RV owner in two different ways. If you're hiring someone like me to come out and deal with it, potentially a much faster diagnostic, so less labor. Or if you're a DIYer and you're doing some of this stuff yourself, that means it might be a little bit easier on you. But again, kind of back to serviceability, and the only con I found there is the control board on this one is actually physically screwed to the blower motor housing. So again, you'd have to have that whole cover off and everything just to get this control board out and say put a test board in there to try it. Whereas on the Suburban, it's actually a pro, because I can slide my hand in there, disconnect it, pull the board out, throw a test board in, or replace the board easy peasy. Replacing a board in this is going to be kind of a chore, because I have to again get that whole cover off to get to the board. But I will say that if this furnace ends up being more reliable, if they're using better components, better switches, I'm not going to say nothing will ever happen. Every device is going to fail. With less failure rate, that might not be the hugest con, until there is a problem, but, just trying to see it from both sides. Now, on the note of diagnosing and error codes, again, I told you on a Suburban or a Dometic, you're going to get a little red blinking light on the control board, meaning you have to access the inside of your furnace, either through that cover or, get back behind the cabinets where the furnace is so you can even see that blinking light. The Fogati uses a touch panel very similar to like a tankless water heater. So you'll have a touch panel like this one sitting on the wall. So you can set the temperature and, all that fun stuff. But when you get an error code, it's actually going to give you the error code right here on the screen. It'd be like E1, E2, E3. And you have a guide that actually tells you what those error codes could be and potential troubleshooting or solutions. I read the manual before I even opened this thing, and I was pretty impressed with their troubleshooting guide. They actually had some pretty good insight on what certain issues could be, how you could resolve them, possible, not ghost issues, but like non-issues or user error. Another benefit of having the touchpad here is there's more than one setting. You could actually change how this thing heats. You can put it in a night mode where it actually calms down a little bit. This thing lets you change how many BTUs it's producing versus temperature. Usually you set it to 75. When it gets to 75, it turns off and then turns back on when it needs to. You could set it to just continuously put out, say, 20,000 BTUs if you want, and set it to go off of BTUs instead of temperature. Not sure where that would come into play, but again, it's more features. Now, on the note of this, when I posted on Facebook about me getting this in before I did this review here, some of the people were concerned about the touchpad. They wanted to know, well, I've got an in-command system, or I've got, a touchscreen on the wall that controls everything in my RV, and they actually built this to accept both. Now, on the wires you have here, just like most furnaces, like the Suburban here, you'll have power and ground, And then you'll have 2 blue wires on a Suburban or Dometic. These are for your thermostat loop. These 2 will go to your thermostat, or if it's like a single wire going to like your in-command system. And then you also have 2 white wires that will go to that controller that I showed you. So you actually have options for both. You could use some of your existing thermostats, any of your digital ones like the newer Furions, the capacitive touch Dometics, or some of the new Suburbans even. Those existing thermostats will not work because those are using proprietary signals going back and forth, and these aren't going to communicate with those. But a standard RV thermostat, or again, your in-command systems, this is set up to run off of those or run off of the touchpad that they give you. Just keep in mind that if you do run it off your in-command or something like that, you're not going to have access to those error codes and stuff the same way you did. But they did think about replacement. Again, considering this an upgrade, it's a direct replacement for the furnace that's in your RV already. It would almost essentially be plug and play. They did think about kind of everybody there. Now, as far as build quality and all of that stuff, this is what, outside of that diaphragm switch, this is what I'm going to consider the star of the show. And I want to remind you before I show you this, this is a brand new Suburban furnace. The only thing it has ever seen is this workbench. I ordered this furnace for one reason and one reason only, and that was to do furnace videos and troubleshooting videos. This is also a brand new furnace. So what I'm about to show you with these heat exchangers is 2 brand new furnaces, one being a Suburban and one being a Fogati, that have just come off the factory line and been shipped to me like any other customer, because that's how I ordered this stuff, to make sure that I'm seeing it how you guys see it. So let's look at these heat exchangers. First one we'll look at is going to be the Fogati. And if you look at the Fogati, I also want you to notice some of the engineering, some of the baffles and ways that they're directing the heat around this heat exchanger everywhere around this thing. There are baffles, there are restrictors in here, and this is a very well designed heat exchanger in my opinion. And then we're going to go over here to the Suburban, which is what is in most of your guys' RVs. And again, this is brand new, and let's look at this. I don't have to say much. You can see the welds don't look the best, you know, and I get this isn't a showpiece. Very little attention to detail. It just doesn't look very nice. And then when it gets to like the bafflings and stuff, you can see that very little was done to help direct the flow of heat properly. And while we're looking at the backs of these, we can look at one last sensor or device that's on these furnaces, which is going to be your over limit switch. If you look over at the Suburban, which is typical, this one's missing the screws because I used it in a video, but you can see you just have this little plate kind of tack welded here with the sensor here. And then over on the Fogati, you can see it's just much nicer mounted. It looks to be like they added kind of like a little diverter to prevent it from overheating. I'm not 100% sure what the design was behind that, but just looking at them, I honestly could have done that entire part of the video completely silent and not even said anything, and just showed you side by side. And I'm pretty sure the average person could have looked at it and said like, hey, one is much better than the other. Now, before we end this video, I am going to actually start both of these up and see how they operate, kind of how loud they are. I don't have a particular setup that I can let these things get too hot here on the bench. We may do some real world testing, and like a lot of things, this may end up getting installed in one of my customers' RVs. See if we can't do some trials with it. But let's talk about a couple more little fine details, and then we'll get these things fired up. One of those is going to be the exhaust. Now, these both look identical, right? They actually pretty much are. I will say, again, even to the small things, like this is just made better. This is definitely just, you know, stamped very crudely, and this, no sharp edges. Like, this thing's really nice. And I know that's such a small thing to nitpick, but let's look at what is attached to the exhaust, like the actual exhaust pipe that's coming out. And I want you to notice the difference between these two. This is the Suburban one, and it's just a crudely made part. It's friction fit. They're usually a real pain to slide on. But then if we pull the one off of the Fogati here, you'll see that this is one clearly just much nicer made. They're using a heat resistant seal on the inside of here, so you're actually going to be getting a good seal, and it slides on nice and smooth when installing it. Again, minuscule details, but those little details really add up when you're looking at something as a whole. Even when it comes to like installation, the installation feet that are built onto the bottom of the furnace core, as well as this kit they give you for vertical installation, you know, sometimes furnaces are mounted vertical. A lot of times when you find a Suburban or a Dometic in there mounted vertical, just got some L brackets or something just crudely screwed. This comes with a like 3-piece, like nice set of vertical mounts for the bottom, for the top, to stop it from pivoting. And they're nicely made. It's not just some crude L brackets. Again, I know minor details, but those minor details add up. So let's get some power to these things, turn them on, and see if either one of them is louder than another. Now, with the microphone I use, I can turn the noise canceling off, but they don't always do the best at determining different sounds. So you're kind of be going off of trusting me. I'm going to tell you, sitting here listening, which one's louder. I was looking for that. I found it. This needs a new blower wheel now. But we'll see if we can get it to work. If the blower wheel's messed up, I guess we'll have to cancel this test, and I'm not going to swap the blower wheel in this thing right now. I'm also not going to clip that out because I hope you guys saw my surprise on my face. I didn't really know what was happening. Take 2. All right, cool. So I didn't mess up the blower wheel. All right, noise canceling off. If you have a DJI mic, you can back me up. I turned the yellow light off. So noise cancellation is off. Not too bad. I'm gonna make sure they fire up too, because that burner noise that you hear is usually what drives people nuts. Now, one thing I just noticed putting power to this Fogati, this is the first time this thing has seen power, is as soon as it gets power, a relay comes on. And I'm not really sure why, because no fan would be coming on or anything like that. I'm wondering if it has like a, I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into that. I'm curious if that's some other kind of built-in like redundancy or safety feature or something like that. Because when you add power to these, there's no relay. The relay only closes when you ask for the fan to come on. This one is clicking as soon as it gets power. But let's get these blue wires here twisted. Of course they're not stripped. It's like you stripped the power and the ground wires, but then you didn't strip these for me. I don't understand it. Don't hate on me. This is the tool that I have right now. I disconnected them. Hold on. I'm going to be honest with you. Clear winner. All right, so here's some complete honesty with you. The Fogati is a little bit louder, not in rattling, just in like a louder fan, if you will. But with that being said, again, in real time, I don't know if you guys kind of saw my just little surprise there. Back here, I'm standing behind the fan. I can feel the air coming off of this. One, I thought this was going to be quieter because when it first came on, it was really quiet. It ramped up. It didn't just give all the power to the motor at once. It ramped up slowly. I'm wondering if that has something to do with that relay click I heard. There's also a lot more going on with that control board than that control board. So the motor actually kind of ramps up, you know, not giving you that surge of power immediately. But once it did, it was a little bit louder on the blower side, but that's because it was blowing significantly more air out back here. And we're going to do some more tests with these again side by side, and I want to find a way to measure the airflow and kind of what's going on there, as well as the amp draw. We might get a little more detailed with the next review, but for now, let's let these things fire up and see what they do, and hopefully I don't burn the top of my table. All right, I've got the microphone over on you guys now so you can hear the noise coming forward out of the exhaust. I've got the noise canceling off. Unfortunately, because of that, you're going to hear my heater behind you guys. that battery is way too dead. As soon as that igniter came on, it just like killed the fan motor. So I guess it's time to change my little bench test battery, if you will. Don't you worry, I've got all kinds of stuff around here. So we'll try this again with a known good power source. Alright, so that kind of caught me off guard there. That battery wasn't dead. By design, what this thing is doing while it's in the ignition cycle is it actually lowers the fan speed significantly. Once it ignites, it slowly ramps it back up. I actually questioned for a second there whether or not it was lit, which is why I was touching the heat exchanger, because it was just a weird process to me. It's not what I'm used to. Typically that sag down during ignition is because of low voltage or a loose connection or something like that, causing low voltage during the ignition cycle. But this just kind of had a funny way of dipping down, and then again, the variable speed fan slowly ramping back up. There's only 2 wires going to the fan. Part of me, being that I'm in the hobby of RC cars, it sounds like a brushless motor to me. I know it's not. But they're doing something with the variable speed. Again, kind of just going back to innovation instead of the almighty dollar. Seems neat. I'm going to look more into that, because to be honest with you, that kind of just got sprung up on me as you're watching it live. But it was a really interesting feature how it kind of ramped down there. So just to be fair, we're going to get the Suburban hooked up, because that's what we do. We be fair. We're going to get the Suburban hooked up. Get all untangled here. Which means I can use this battery that I definitely thought was dead and is definitely not. Alright, so 3, 2, 1. Maybe I should turn the propane on. Hey, we have ignition. Quite honestly, guys, about the same amount of noise for combustion. Not surprised there, because really when it comes to like existing furnaces, like those ones that have that deep roar or something like that, that usually is an issue with like a misalignment of the burner or something. There's just a lot of them that come from factory like that, which is why it's kind of a common problem out at the campgrounds where you have that one neighbor where their furnace is a little noisy. Now, as far as just general noise of the fan, again, the Fogati is actually a little bit louder, but this thing's moving some air. So I don't want to count that as a con. Once this thing's in a case and buried away in a cabinet somewhere, you're not going to hear that either way, but you are going to feel the additional airflow flowing through your RV. Maybe I can get lucky enough to get one of the guys on the engineering side over at Fogati to get with me and go over some of the technical reasons why we experience some of that, that fan kind of coming down during ignition and then ramping back up. That was pretty interesting for me. So I hope to get some more answers on that. Currently, where it stands, I'm going to stand behind what I said. I'd love to see some more of this innovation, if you will, in RV furnaces. Right now, Fogati is the one doing that, so I'm going to definitely call this an upgrade with some caution. And the caution that's hot. And the caution that I'm exercising is, I, of course, did some research on this before making this video. Parts are available, right? Like, I can get replacement parts. I can reach out to Fogati and I can get them. The network of it and the ability isn't quite there yet. They haven't quite built the network, or at least for you as an RV owner, you know, being a DIYer, don't have as much ability to get your hands on some of those parts. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying you're not going to just be picking up the phone real quick or going on a website real quick and making it happen with certain parts. I assume if, you know, sales of this, or, you know, more of them are produced, or a manufacturer picks them up, that will definitely change. But in light of being honest, that's something I'm going to call kind of a con right now. But even with the couple of cons I found, like the case and, you know, the screws on the control board, there is so much about this, so many pros to this setup and the innovation that they've done, that I'm still going to say this is a clear winner for me right now, and definitely an upgrade from your typical RV furnace. If they can get the few things sorted away, maybe change how this slides out of the cage and can be removed, pulling the core essentially. If, you know, they can come up with more of a quick release method for the control board, so you don't need to remove the whole thing, just to remove the control board, as well as maybe making a clear and direct site, you know, what model number furnace you have, where, you know, what parts are available for it, and making those parts easy to order or obtain for the everyday user, because the DIY market is becoming so much more popular. This is, it would be an absolute no-brainer. And then, of course, we have to be honest, works great right here on the bench. Let's see how they do out in the field. So any of you guys who do have this furnace installed, I know there are some people out there who already have these installed, let me know in the comments, how's it working for you? Have you had any issues with it? I'd love that feedback so that I can continue updating people on this. Again, as of right now, I'm going to call this the clear winner, and definitely an upgrade over your typical RV furnace. I want to thank Fogati again for sending this out to me. I don't have a discount code for you guys or anything like that. Again, this isn't an affiliate deal. I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing this because I'm genuinely intrigued, and I do think that this company is going to make their way in the industry if they continue with innovation. If they can have parts readily available just like these, this is going to be a clear winner. And for those of you, again, manufacturers who are watching, I know some of you guys watch my content, and I'll be recommending maybe ordering one of these and checking them out to some of the manufacturers I have relationships with. See how it does. Put it in a prototype unit. Check it out. See what happens, because I have high hopes for this thing. If you guys want to see some more RV tech tips, tricks, and even some tutorials, make sure you guys press that subscribe button.